take.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And pursuant to your request, Mr. Speaker, I can indicate at the beginning of this contribution that for this first reading debate, the Green Party will, as a party, vote for this reading of the bill. Mr. Speaker, some members will be familiar with the extraordinary piece of work undertaken by the Law Commission, and this is the Law Commission's report from 2010, following a really extensive piece of work involving many public submissions and a great deal of involvement from stakeholders right across the sector. And that report generated, from its recommendations, a government bill, eventually, some might say, a government bill that in turn went to select committee and also received very many submissions from the public and from stakeholders about alcohol law in New Zealand. And it was 2012, Mr. Speaker, that this House passed that legislation. Now, the evidence in this Law Commission report and in the precursor reports was that the consumption of alcohol in New Zealand is associated with harm. I've got New Zealand police statistics, for example, Mr. Speaker, that's saying that 1/3 of all offences that the police deal with are committed by someone who has recently consumed alcohol. And for some offences, like serious violence, it's 1 in 2. So there is serious harm associated with alcohol. And the Law Commission concluded, on the basis of its review of evidence, that the more available alcohol was, the more would be consumed and the more harm would be caused. And that is why the Law Commission, in its recommendations to the House and in this House's treatment of those recommendations, basically sought to strike a balance between people's freedom of choice and the need to protect people from harm. And that's why we set up a regime that provides for a local process in which premises are allocated locations and hours and conditions. They are designed to protect people from harm. Now, if premises want to serve alcohol outside of those licensed hours, there is a regime that we set up in the law for special licences. And in its report, the Law Commission, in fact, uses international rugby fixtures as an example of the kind of special event that would be appropriate for the use of special licences. And those members of the House who were present for the debate in 2012 may well recall that actually our debate also specifically talked about the Rugby World Cup and its appropriate use for special licences. And certainly there's nothing at all in the existing law that actually would prevent special licences being used for Rugby World Cup fixtures. So that's the appropriate mechanism. So why is there a problem now, Mr. Speaker? Well, it turns out that the police in some parts of New Zealand are saying that Rugby World Cup fixtures do not qualify for the special licences. Now, what that suggests to me and to the Green Party is that what we need is a review of how Parliament's intentions around special licences have been implemented. And Mr. Speaker, that's how we should proceed. But we don't have time right now. What we have to do right now is actually address the fact that the Rugby World Cup is just around the corner. We saw David Seymour's bill for the first time yesterday morning. We denied leave for it to be introduced yesterday because we had major concerns. We are now confident, Mr. Speaker, that as a result of the discussions we've had with David Seymour, the assurances he's given us, and also the good faith discussions that we've had with government, that the issues that we had around a bill that covered all games, in other words, most days over a 6-week period, and all licensed premises, including those operated by licensees who'd previously breached licences, including those that were in locations that were just around the corner from a kindy, that those issues are in fact going to be dealt with. We still believe that this measure ought to have been dealt with, not as a member's bill, but as a government bill. We believe that that is the appropriate way for dealing with an issue of this sort, for some of the reasons, actually, that the Minister, Amy Adams, discussed in her contribution.
I'm sorry, the member's time has expired.
I've got more, Mr Speaker.
About 2 minutes ago, no, it wasn't 2 minutes ago. I was conferring with my colleagues, so you got more than you needed. I'm going to call Clayton Mitchell.
Mr Speaker.